I was bleeding out on a hospital gurney, bones broken, ribs cracked, breath shallow, when my father told me to stop being dramatic. Vanessa was having a panic attack, and she needed him more. That's when I knew I could be dying, and he still wouldn't come, because I was the strong one, the dependable one, the one who never needed saving. But in that sterile, blinking ER, something inside me snapped. This wasn't the first time they left me behind. It was just the last. And what I did next wasn't out of anger, it was out of survival. The crunch of metal was deafening, a screech followed by silence that felt like a vacuum. When I opened my eyes, the world tilted. The windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks, and blood trickled down my cheek. My leg wouldn't move. Pain roared through my side. Someone shouted in the distance. Sirens approached. I wasn't fully conscious when they lifted me onto the stretcher. I remember the paramedic's calm urgency, his words cutting through the haze. "She's responsive. Compound fracture in the left femur. Suspected internal bleeding. Let's move." Everything was a blur until the hospital lights blazed overhead, cold and blinding. A nurse asked me questions I barely heard. Could I feel my toes? Do I know my name? I mumbled, "Rachel Myers. I think my leg's broken." The antiseptic stung my nose, and the thin hospital blanket scratched my skin. I was trembling. My phone was cracked but still barely usable. I had one person listed as my emergency contact, my father. I called once. Voicemail. I called again. Ring, then silence. On the third try, he picked up. His voice was already irritated. "Rachel, what's going on? I'm in the middle of something." I'm at the hospital," I whispered. "There was a car accident. I think I need surgery. My leg—" He cut me off. "Are you dying?" "What?" I blinked at the bright ceiling, my throat thick with blood and disbelief. I said, "Are you dying? Vanessa's having a full-blown panic attack. She bombed her interview this morning and hasn't stopped crying. I can't leave her like this." I stared at the phone. "Dad, I'm in the ER. They said it might be internal bleeding." He sighed, and it wasn't concern. It was annoyance. "Rachel, you're tough. You've always been the strong one. Don't make a big deal out of this. I'll come by later. Claire needs me now." The line went dead. The room buzzed in silence. Machines beeped around me. A nurse walked by, adjusted the IV, and asked if anyone was coming. I said yes, but I wasn't sure anymore. Lying there, my legs splintered, throat raw, I replayed the call. Not just the words, but the tone, the disbelief in my own voice, the indifference in his, how quickly he chose her. Again, it wasn't the first time. There had been birthdays where he forgot my cake but built Vanessa a backyard wonderland with string lights and a rented cotton candy machine. Graduations where he missed mine because Vanessa had a panic attack over a B-. Every family holiday, he hovered over her like she might shatter at any moment. Me? I was the easy one, the one who never needed help. I got straight A's, paid my own tuition, held 2 jobs through college, and never asked for anything. He called it independence. I called it invisible. Tonight, the pattern cracked like my femur. I needed him, really needed him. And he left me. It wasn't just about the accident, it was about everything that came before. The years I spent earning his love through quiet competence, thinking if I never made trouble, if I kept the peace, he'd notice me too. Instead, he leaned on me when things got hard, asked me to cover Vanessa's rent just this once, suggested I take her in for a few months when she got evicted because you've got the space. When she totaled her car, he used my savings to help her out. Without asking, he called it family pulling together. Lying under fluorescent lights, I realized I was family only when I was useful. My pain didn't count. My needs weren't urgent. A nurse returned. "Do you want me to call someone else?" I shook my head. This was the moment something in me shifted. The crash had broken more than bone. It broke the illusion that I was ever protected, ever prioritized. I wasn't the backup plan. I was never part of the plan. The nurse dimmed the lights when she returned, offering a soft, practiced smile. "Just press this if you need anything," she said, placing a small remote near my good hand. I nodded, and as she left, the room felt colder, not from temperature, but from knowing no one was coming. Not my father, not Vanessa, no one. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them like they might offer answers. I was still trying to process not the crash, not even the pain, but the decision he made, how easily he abandoned me, how reflexive it was. When you grow up in a family where love is conditional, you stop noticing the conditions. You normalize the imbalance. I used to tell myself I was lucky, that I wasn't the one with anxiety or mood swings or panic attacks. I could function. So I did. I got my license on my own. I applied to college alone. I learned how to budget, how to build credit, how to survive. Vanessa, on the other hand, couldn't go 2 weeks without calling Dad to fix something, and he always did. No matter how messy, how self-inflicted, he showed up, because she needed him. But need is deceptive. Sometimes strength doesn't look like holding it together. It looks like finally admitting you're hurt. And I was hurt. I wasn't just physically broken, I was emotionally gutted. For years, I'd swallowed my resentment, told myself Vanessa was delicate, that Dad just worried more about her, that being the strong one was noble, but strength shouldn't mean invisibility, it shouldn't mean neglect. I remembered one night from college, my roommate had food poisoning and I called Dad in a panic, unsure what to do. He answered, "Why are you calling me? You're smart. Figure it out." But 2 weeks later, Vanessa got a flat tire on the side of the highway and he drove 4 hours to fix it. She posted about it on Instagram. My hero. Hero. The word echoed now like an insult. The IV beeped, my leg throbbed, my mouth was dry, but all I could feel was hollow. I opened my phone again and scrolled aimlessly. No messages from Dad, no check-ins, not even a hang in there. I checked Vanessa's social media out of morbid curiosity. Sure enough, there it was. A selfie, red-eyed and tragic, captioned, "Some days just destroy you. Thankful for my support system. Love you, Dad. Had anxiety's real." It had 300 likes. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, not from tears but fury, not because she lied, but because she didn't even have to. She didn't have to manipulate. She didn't have to justify. All she had to do was cry, and he came running. Meanwhile, I bled alone. Something cracked again inside me. Not bone this time, but belief. Belief that I could earn his love. Belief that if I worked hard, stayed quiet, kept giving, it would eventually be my turn. It was never going to be my turn, because my role had never been daughter. It was caretaker, backup, silent supporter of someone else's drama. And I was done. I pressed the nurse's call button. She arrived within seconds. "Can I update my emergency contact?" I asked, my voice steady now. She nodded. "Of course." I gave her the name, Carmen Ruiz, a lawyer I worked with years ago on a housing dispute, someone who once told me, "If you ever need something personal handled, I've got you." I never imagined I'd need her for this, but I did, because from this moment on I was rewriting the rules. No more silent strength, no more bleeding in the background. If my family only valued me when I cost nothing, then they would no longer have access to me at all. Growing up, I didn't realize I was the shadow. Shadows don't know they're invisible, they just follow the light. And in our house, the light always pointed at Vanessa. She was born 2 years after me, premature, fragile, always needing. That's what they said. She needs more time, more care, more understanding. So they gave her all of it. My toys were shared, my stories interrupted, my victories minimized. At first I didn't mind. I was the big sister. I was proud to help. I brought her snacks when she cried, read her stories when she couldn't sleep. My reward wasn't praise, it was silence. Dad would pat my head and say, "That's my helper." And I wore that title like a badge, until it started to weigh like a chain. By the time we were teenagers, Vanessa's needs had turned into dramas, panic attacks when tests went wrong, meltdowns over social media posts, entire weekends rearranged so she wouldn't spiral. And me? I learned to keep quiet. I stopped inviting friends over. I stopped asking for help with homework. I became self-sufficient, efficient, predictable, invisible. When I brought home straight A's, Dad nodded. Good, that's expected. When Vanessa scraped by with a C-, he threw her a dinner. She was resilient, I was reliable. One cried and got comfort, the other endured and got ignored. But I didn't question it, not then. I told myself it was normal, that love just looked different for each child. Then came the time I was supposed to get braces, and Vanessa needed therapy instead. Rachel's teeth aren't that bad, Dad told the orthodontist. We'll revisit later. Later never came. In college, when Vanessa called him sobbing over a lost phone, he wired her $600 within the hour. When I told him my laptop stopped turning on, he suggested Craigslist. I still remember sitting in my dorm's common area that night, watching her post a photo of her new phone with the caption, "Thankful for a dad who always comes through." And I liked the post, because that's what I did. I supported. Even when no one supported me, the truth is I trained them. I trained them to overlook me, to assume I'd be okay. I never made noise, never made demands. I cleaned up after Vanessa's messes, took her calls at 2 a.m. when she thought she had insomnia, lent her money when she got evicted for the second time. Just until I get back on my feet, she said. But she never found her footing. Dad told me once, "You're the stable one, Rachel. Thank God for you." And I smiled. But inside, I felt like I was drowning in gratitude that sounded like obligation. He didn't say, "I love you." He said, "I need you." And I mistook the two for far too long. It was only in that hospital bed, splintered, stitched, and aching, that I saw it clearly. I wasn't their daughter. I was their structure, the emotional scaffolding holding up a crumbling family. But scaffolding gets removed once the building stands. Or in my case, once Vanessa felt better. And when I needed support, just once, I was left in the cold. By the time I entered the workforce, Vanessa had already moved back home twice. Once after quitting her first job because corporate culture crushed her spirit. And again after ending a 6-month relationship that destroyed her sense of self. Each time, Dad opened the door with arms wide and his checkbook ready. I, on the other hand, had 3 jobs my first year out of college, one for rent, one for food, and one for loan payments. I called Dad once, just once, when I thought I might be short for rent due to an emergency vet bill. His response was instant. "You need to budget better, Rachel. You're not a kid anymore." I didn't ask again. Instead, I learnt to stretch $40 across 2 weeks. I learned how to fix a leaky faucet through YouTube. I learned silence. But even silence has a breaking point. I started keeping records last year, bank transfers, text messages, emails. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't even angry yet. Something in me just knew I needed proof. Maybe it was the way Dad asked if I could float Vanessa's car payment again. "Just until she gets that new position," he said. But I'd seen the pattern before. The position would fall through, and I'd be left covering more than a car payment. Still, I agreed, because that's what I always did. Until now. Now, lying in that hospital bed with bruises blooming across my ribs and stitches tugging at my side, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in decades. Rage, not the fiery, loud kind, the kind that simmers, that sharpens your vision, that removes illusions, because here was the truth. Vanessa wasn't a helpless victim. She was a master of expectation. She knew exactly how to tilt her head, widen her eyes, tremble just enough. She had Dad wrapped around her trauma like a comfort blanket, and every time I stepped in, she got to keep being the broken one. And me, I became the glue, the unbreakable one, until I did break, and when I did, no one showed up. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was bleeding and they were busy supporting someone who hadn't held a job longer than 6 months, who still used the word triggered as a shield against responsibility, who cried when the Wi-Fi glitched during her therapy app and demanded a refund. Vanessa had weaponized fragility, and Dad had rewarded it. My strength wasn't just unappreciated, it was punished, expected, exploited. I remembered one Thanksgiving. Vanessa broke down over dinner because someone mentioned grad school and she hadn't applied. Dad took her upstairs, left the rest of us at the table, and I ended up cleaning everything, alone. Another Christmas, she forgot to buy gifts. Dad handed her $100 bill and said, "Here, just get something small. Rachel won't mind." He was right, I didn't complain, but I minded. I minded every time I was told, "You're the strong one," instead of "You deserve more." I minded every time Vanessa's spirals became my burden. I minded that in a family of 3, I was always third in line. Now, watching the IV drip next to me, I didn't feel strong. I felt used, hollowed out, but strangely free. Because for the first time, I was choosing not to hold it together, not to excuse it, not to explain it away with "they mean well," because they didn't. If they had, I wouldn't have been alone that night, whispering my own name to a nurse because no one else had thought to show up. I hadn't spoken to Carmen Ruiz in over 4 years. We met during a housing dispute when my landlord tried to evict me illegally after Vanessa crashed at my place for 3 months and never paid rent. Carmen had handled it with a calm authority that stunned me. She saw through the landlord's tactics instantly and protected me with a quiet fierceness I hadn't experienced in a long time. Now, I found her number buried in my old contacts list, saved under Ruiz, the good one. My fingers hesitated over the call button. I'd never asked for this kind of help before. Not legal, not emotional, not anything. But I wasn't the same woman I was last week. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was alert, but warm. "Carmen Ruiz." "It's Rachel Myers," I said, and my throat tightened with the weight of everything that name now carried. A pause. Then, "Rachel, are you safe?" It caught me off guard. Not what happened, or why are you calling? Just, are you safe? "Yes, I mean, physically, yes," I replied. "But I need help, legal help." I told her everything, halting at first, then gaining momentum as the words spilled. The car crash, my father's dismissal, the years of financial support I'd given without protest, the thousands in transfers, the emotional weight, the silence, the callousness. Carmen didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp or rush to soothe. She just listened. And when I finished, she asked the simplest question. "What do you want to do?" "I want to cut them off," I said, surprising even myself with the certainty in my voice. "I want them removed from everything. Bank access, legal documents, my will, emergency contacts, all of it." Another pause, this one respectful. "Do you have documentation of the support you gave them?" "I do," I said. I didn't know why I kept it, but I started saving texts, bank records, emails, screenshots. "Then we can make this clean," she said. "I'll come to the hospital tomorrow morning. We'll draft everything." "And Rachel?" "Yes?" "You don't have to do this alone anymore." I felt something uncoil in my chest, something so tightly wound for so long it took a moment to recognize it. Relief. The next morning, Carmen arrived just as the sun lit the sterile blinds in pale orange. She wore a tailored navy blazer, her dark hair pulled back into a low bun, a leather briefcase slung over her shoulder. She looked like certainty, like someone who didn't flinch. She greeted me with a nod, pulled a chair beside my bed, and opened her laptop. "I brought a portable scanner. We'll upload everything here," she said, already sliding folders onto her screen. I handed her a flash drive. "I labelled everything," I said, "by year, and then by type, loans, payments, emotional appeals." Her brows lifted slightly, not with pity, but with respect. "You built your case." I hadn't thought of it like that. I thought I was just cataloguing my own erasure. But maybe that's what cases are. Evidence that something real happened, even if no one believed you at the time. Carmen's fingers moved swiftly. She pulled up a spreadsheet cross-referencing dates and amounts. $400 for Vanessa's therapy copay, $900 for rent after she lost her third job, $150 here, $300 there. Dozens of entries, thousands of dollars, spread across 5 years. She turned the screen toward me. "You've given them just under $84,000, she said. "That's a home down payment, a new car, a retirement fund." I stared at the number, the weight of it sinking into my bones. "That's my life," I whispered. "No," she said gently. "That's what you gave away. We're here to reclaim what's left." Carmen worked like a surgeon, precise, methodical, unshaken. She drafted revocation documents for the general power of attorney I'd given Dad years ago, just in case. She updated the beneficiaries on my will, removing both him and Vanessa entirely. She set new restrictions on my bank accounts, issued formal notices, and pulled up legal templates with fluid speed. "Once these are signed, they'll no longer have access to anything tied to your name," she said calmly. I nodded, trying to absorb what this all meant, the weight of it, the freedom of it, and the grief. Because cutting someone off isn't just about protection, it's about letting go of the version of them you kept hoping would appear. "I feel like I'm betraying my family," I admitted quietly. Carmen looked up. "No, Rachel. You're recognizing that they betrayed you consistently, repeatedly, and you're responding accordingly. That's not betrayal, that's self-respect." Her words hit like truth always does, gently but with weight. I signed the first document with a trembling hand, then another and another. Each signature felt like a reclamation. A step out of a shadow I had lived in so long, I thought it was shelter. By the time we reached the final paper, my hands were steadier. Carmen slid the completed documents into her folder. "You've done the hard part," she said. "From here, I'll handle the notices. I'll send official revocation letters. They'll be served within 48 hours. "And when they find out?" I asked. "They'll be angry, defensive, maybe even vindictive," she said plainly. "But they can't undo this. The law is on your side now." She paused. "If you want to, we can set up a private trust. Something with your name only, protected by a third party. That way, if they try to manipulate or guilt their way back in, there's a legal wall." "Yes," I said immediately. "Do it." That night, after Carmen left, I sat in my hospital bed, staring out the window. The world looked exactly the same, but it wasn't. Not to me. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting. Not for a call, not for an apology, not for someone to finally see me. I had seen myself. I reached for my phone and deleted Dad's contact. Then Vanessa's. Then the shared family photo group. Each deletion was a stitch, sewing closed an old wound that had been left gaping too long. I opened a new savings account with Carmen's guidance, transferred what was left, set new passwords, chose a new emergency contact. Not a blood relative, a friend, a choice. I didn't sleep much, but when I did, it was the first time in years I didn't dream about failing someone. I didn't wake in a cold sweat, wondering if Vanessa needed something. I didn't brace myself for guilt masked as concern. Instead, I slept knowing I had drawn a line, not out of spite, but out of survival. The next day, Carmen texted, "All documents are filed. They'll be served by this evening. Stay strong." I texted back, "I already am." They came at 4:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, 37 hours after Carmen sent the documents. The door creaked open, slow like a scene in a courtroom drama. First came my father, his tie loosened but deliberate, as if to signal urgency without effort. His expression walked the line between concern and accusation. Then came Vanessa, oversized sunglasses propped on her head like a crown of fragility, her lips pursed into a permanent pout. She looked like someone mourning attention. But what they didn't expect was Carmen, already seated beside me, calm, unmoved, flipping through a copy of the signed revocations. My father's eyes narrowed the second he saw her. "Who is this?" he asked sharply. Carmen didn't flinch. "Good evening. I'm Carmen Ruiz, Rachel's attorney." The word attorney hit like a gunshot in the small hospital room. Vanessa's jaw dropped. "An attorney? For what?" I sat up straighter, ignoring the pull of stitches along my ribs. "For everything you've taken without permission," I said evenly. My father raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" I looked at Carmen, who gave a slight nod. "I've revoked your power of attorney. You no longer have access to my accounts. You're no longer listed on my medical forms. You and Vanessa are both removed from my will, effective immediately." Vanessa scoffed. "Are you serious? Over what? A car accident?" Carmen tapped her tablet. "Actually, over 5 years of documented financial manipulation, coercion, and neglect." She turned the screen toward them. "Here's just a sample." The colour drained from my father's face as he scanned the spreadsheet. Vanessa crossed her arms, bristling. "I was in crisis. And I was in surgery prep," I snapped. "Alone, because you both decided my pain wasn't dramatic enough to matter." "You're being hysterical," my father said, and I could see the panic behind his eyes now, the desperate attempt to retake control. "Don't," I said. "Don't minimize me again. Don't pretend you didn't choose her, over and over." "I raised you," he barked. "I gave you everything." "You trained me," I corrected. "To be silent, to give, to disappear so she could shine." Vanessa stepped forward. "This isn't you, Rachel. You don't talk like this. You're the nice one." "No," I said. "I was the compliant one, the one who paid, the one who never made you uncomfortable." Carmen rose slowly. "This conversation is over. All legal notifications have been served. You are now trespassing in a medical facility under patient protection." My father's eyes flashed. "This is betrayal." "No," I said, finally calm. "This is justice." Carmen opened the door. My father hesitated for a second, then stormed out. Vanessa lingered, her expression flickering between outrage and something more vulnerable. "I needed you," she whispered. I met her eyes. "And I needed a sister." She left without another word. Carmen sat back down, her voice soft but certain. "They'll lash out, probably online, maybe through extended family, but their power is gone. What happens next? Only you decide." And I realized she was right. For the first time, the script wasn't theirs anymore. They didn't wait long. That same night, while IV drips hummed beside me and the ache in my leg flared with every heartbeat, the messages started. First came Vanessa. "I can't believe you blindsided us like that." You've always been jealous. You just want to humiliate me in front of him. You're not a victim. You're playing one for attention." Then my father chimed in, his texts like bullets. "This is betrayal. After all we did for you. I paid for your braces, your childhood, your education, and this is how you repay me?" Each message chipped at my shell, but Carmen's words echoed louder. "Silence is power." So I didn't respond. I didn't defend. I muted their numbers, let my phone buzz itself into irrelevance. And yet, it wasn't just the texts that stung. It was the online backlash. 2 days after I was discharged, hobbling around my apartment on crutches, I opened Facebook out of habit. Big mistake. My father had posted a vague status. Sometimes the ones you love most hurt you the deepest, especially when they forget who helped them grow. The comments came flooding in, relatives, old family friends, church members. Aunt Lorraine, "Loyalty is everything. We raised our kids better than this." Uncle Jim, "Entitlement in this generation is off the charts." No one tagged me, but everyone knew. I didn't respond. I didn't even cry, at least not right away. But when I scrolled further and saw Vanessa's story, her curled up in bed, captioned, "Trying to breathe, please pray for strength," something broke. I closed the app and threw my phone across the couch. They were spinning the narrative, painting me as the cold one, the ungrateful one. As if 5 years of silent sacrifice didn't matter. As if bleeding alone in a hospital bed wasn't enough to justify my anger. But here's what they didn't expect. They didn't expect who stayed silent and who didn't. My cousin Jordan, quiet, introverted, barely visible at family reunions, DM'd me, "Hey, I just want you to know I believe you. I saw how they treated you. Vanessa was always the storm and you were expected to be the umbrella. That wasn't fair." And that message, it shattered me, because for the first time someone saw me, without needing an explanation. Emily from work showed up 2 days later with groceries, no questions asked. Just a warm hug and a stocked fridge. Nora, my neighbour, texted, "You don't owe anyone your survival." I realised then, family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when the lights go out, who listens without judgment, who believes your pain without needing proof. I returned to therapy, really talked for the first time, not just about what happened, but why I let it happen for so long. My therapist said something I'll never forget. You weren't loved for who you were. You were rewarded for what you gave. That's not love, that's transaction. It hit like truth always does, sharp, sudden, and liberating. I started building boundaries. New savings account, new locks, new passwords. I blocked Vanessa, I blocked Dad, not out of anger, but out of peace. They stopped trying eventually, after Carmen served the final notice. No apology, no remorse, their absence used to terrify me. Now it was a gift. Healing didn't look like what I expected. There were no grand revelations, no swelling background music, no perfect moments of closure, just small, quiet steps, some forwards, some backwards, but all mine. The first was cooking dinner for myself and not feeling the need to post it, share it, or prove I was doing okay. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, leg propped up on a chair, eating alone without feeling lonely. The second was laughter, real, unforced laughter, when Nora stopped by with her dog, who promptly knocked over my crutches and stole half my sandwich. I laughed so hard I cried, not from pain, but from something that felt dangerously close to joy. I started walking again, not far at first, around the block, then to the corner cafe, eventually to the park. I didn't tell anyone, I didn't ask for praise, I just moved my body because it felt good to move without obligation. And still, the ache lingered, not in my leg, that was healing beautifully, but in my chest. A quiet, persistent wound where my father's voice used to echo. Where Vanessa's need used to live. That wound didn't bleed, it didn't scream, it whispered. You weren't enough. You should have tried harder. You're the one who walked away. That whisper was the hardest to silence, because it sounded so much like me. Until one day during therapy, I admitted something I hadn't dared say aloud. I thought if I was perfect, they'd love me back. My therapist nodded slowly. And now? Now I know they loved what I gave them, not who I was. And what do you want to do with that truth? I didn't answer right away, because truth doesn't always demand action. Sometimes it just demands acknowledgement. So I started writing, not for revenge, not for exposure, just for clarity. I filled page after page in a cheap spiral notebook. I wrote about the time Vanessa borrowed my laptop for school and never gave it back. About the time Dad missed my graduation dinner because Vanessa had a rough day. About how I used to listen at doors, hoping to hear my name said with pride. I wrote about silence, how it crept into every corner of my childhood, how praise was loud for her and quiet for me, how disappointment echoed louder when directed at me than it ever did at her. I didn't know what I'd do with all those words, but writing them down made them real, made me real, because for years I thought love looked like sacrifice, like being the one who didn't need, the one who could wait, the one who never asked for more. Now I was asking, not from them, but from myself, to be seen, to be cared for, to matter. Not for what I could give, but just because I existed. The next phase of healing came with redefining safety. Not just physical safety, my apartment had new locks, and Carmen had helped me update every document that mattered, but emotional safety, the kind you don't realize you've been missing until you finally feel it. It looked like declining dinner invitations that felt like obligations, saying no when I meant it, letting texts sit unanswered without guilt crawling up my spine. It also looked like unexpected connection. A few weeks after the confrontation, Jordan, my cousin who had messaged support, invited me to a small gathering. Nothing flashy, just 5 people and a backyard barbecue. I almost said no. My instinct told me to stay quiet, to avoid being the drama cousin. But something nudged me to say yes. And there, sitting beneath string lights and the smell of grilled vegetables, I found something rare, presence. No one asked about Dad. No one tiptoed around Vanessa. We talked about favourite books, bad dates, embarrassing stories. And when someone brought up family, Jordan just raised his glass and said, "To the ones we choose." I nearly cried into my lemonade. Healing also came in therapy, slow, jagged pieces that stitched together through honest conversation. One session I asked, why did I wait so long to leave? My therapist didn't rush the answer. Because leaving something dysfunctional often feels more terrifying than staying in it, especially when the dysfunction is disguised as love. That stuck with me. Love wasn't supposed to feel like currency, like something you earn through self-erasure. But for years, I'd been spending myself down to 0, hoping for a deposit of affection in return. Now I was learning to hold on to myself. I started taking small risks, things that felt terrifying before but now felt essential. I shared a short essay, based on my notebook writing, at a local storytelling night. Just a few pages, no names, no drama, just truth. I read about being the dependable one, about how silence isn't always strength, about how sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. The room was quiet when I finished, then someone clapped, and then another, and then the whole room did. It wasn't validation I craved, it was connection. And in that room for the first time, I felt it without guilt. Afterward, a woman approached me. She looked like someone's favourite aunt, soft eyes and hands worn from work. "I just want to say thank you," she said. "My daughter is the Vanessa in our family, and I've been the father, always rushing to rescue her, forgetting my other daughter needed me too. Your story reminded me of her." We hugged. Strangers bonded by old patterns and new awareness. That night, walking home, I didn't limp. Not physically, not emotionally. I felt taller, not because I had conquered anything, but because I had stopped shrinking. Healing looked like that. Like small, consistent refusals to keep bleeding for people who never notice the stains. Like choosing silence not as surrender, but as sanctuary. Like building a life so full, the absence of your past doesn't echo anymore. It came in the form of a voicemail. 3 months after I last saw them, after legal documents had been signed and silence had settled into something like peace, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play. "Rachel, it's Dad." His voice was different, softer, tired, like someone trying to sound composed but failing beneath the weight of years. I heard about the legal stuff. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. Vanessa's not doing well. I've had to pick up a lot on her end. I'm tired, Rach." He paused, as if expecting me to respond to comfort. Then came the twist. "I still think this was cruel. You could have talked to us. We're family." That has to count for something. Click. That was it, a half-hearted guilt trip masquerading as a peace offering. Not once did he ask how I was doing. Not once did he acknowledge what he'd done, what he'd failed to do. And for the first time, I didn't feel tempted to call back. I didn't craft a mental response. I didn't rehearse what I'd say if we met again. I simply deleted it. That was the real goodbye. No dramatic monologue, No door slammed in slow motion. Just a quiet decision to no longer play the game. But life has a sense of humour and timing. 1 week later, I received a message from Vanessa. No apology, no explanation, just a single line. I need your help. I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't know the answer, but because part of me mourned how easy it was now to say no. Vanessa had been my blueprint for sacrifice, the measuring stick for how much I was willing to bleed to feel loved, and now she was just another blocked number. I didn't reply. Instead, I wrote another page in my notebook. Just because someone needs you doesn't mean they deserve you. The final goodbye wasn't a conversation. It was a realization I could move on without an ending. That weekend, I packed a box of old things, pictures from childhood, cards with half-hearted love yous signed under obligation, trinkets I once kept to feel connected. I brought them to the local donation centre and left them without fanfare. It felt strange how light I became in their absence. I passed by a mirror on my way out and did something I hadn't done in years. I smiled. Not out of politeness, not because someone expected me to, just because I could. In the following weeks, I expected the silence to feel like abandonment again, like that first night in the hospital counting ceiling tiles and wondering why no one came, but it didn't. It felt calm. I started noticing things I had missed while living under the weight of everyone else's needs, like how the light in my apartment shifted at 4 p.m, casting long golden stripes across the floor. Or how my favourite tea didn't taste as bitter when steeped a little longer. Or how I'd started humming again when I cooked. Grief was still there, but it had softened. Less like a knife, more like a bruise I pressed sometimes just to remind myself I'd survived. I reconnected with old friends, ones I hadn't spoken to in years because I was always putting out Vanessa's fires or smoothing over Dad's cold silences. Turns out I wasn't as forgotten as I feared. Some of them had simply stopped reaching out when I stopped showing up for myself, and slowly they welcomed me back. Carmen stayed in touch too, checking in with quick texts, reminding me of paperwork, asking if I'd considered therapy again. One afternoon, I sent her a picture of my garden window, now lined with fresh herbs. "Progress," I captioned it. She replied, "Healing in basil and thyme." That made me laugh. I started doing small things just for me. A pottery class, a solo trip to a bookstore an hour away, journaling at sunrise. No one to impress, no one to prove myself to. Just me. And in that solitude, something radical happened. I stopped needing closure. There would be no apology from my father, no epiphany from Vanessa. No moment where they realised how much damage they'd done. And that was okay, because their recognition was never going to fix the fracture. It was never going to return the birthdays they missed, the tears they dismissed, the love they rationed. What fixed it was this: waking up and not dreading the sound of a message notification, setting a boundary and not flinching, looking in the mirror and seeing someone whole, not someone waiting to be completed by someone else's approval. I thought about writing a letter, something final, maybe cathartic, but I didn't. Because I didn't need them to know I'd healed, I only needed to feel it. One afternoon, I passed the hospital while running errands. The building loomed in the distance, a quiet reminder of where everything broke and where everything began. I didn't flinch, didn't speed up, didn't avoid eye contact with the past. Instead, I crossed the street and stood for a moment, watching the ambulances come and go. That's where it started, I thought, the breaking and the rebuilding. And then I turned away, light, whole, unburdened, and walked toward the life I had built by choosing myself. I never expected peace to feel like this, quiet, unflashy, but undeniable. Not a grand transformation, no dramatic new city or reinvention, just waking up each morning and knowing that the day ahead belonged to me, fully, without compromise. I kept my apartment. I didn't run. That had been my instinct for a long time. When things hurt, change the scene. But this time I stayed. I repainted the walls a soft sage green, hung photos of places I wanted to visit, framed a quote above my desk that read, "You are allowed to outgrow people." It made me smile every time I saw it. My mornings became rituals of intention, tea with honey, stretching, journaling. Sometimes I wrote about Vanessa and Dad, but more often I wrote about myself, not what I'd endured, but what I was discovering, like how I actually loved solitude. Or how I was good with money, better than I thought, now that no one was siphoning my savings through emotional blackmail. Or how for the first time in my life, I felt safe with myself. The biggest surprise, how many people began to drift into my life once I stopped clinging to the ones who constantly hurt me. At the local bookstore, I met Elise, a woman in her late 50s with sharp wit and soft eyes. We struck up a conversation about memoirs, and by the end of it, we were sharing lunch recommendations. She later introduced me to her friends, a community book club, a mixed group of women who'd all survived something: divorce, loss, estrangement. We met monthly, we laughed, we cried, we shared recipes and heartbreaks. And no one ever told me I was too much for feeling. One night as we sat under string lights on Elise's patio, someone asked, "What would you tell your younger self if she were here now?" I didn't hesitate. I'd tell her that love isn't something you earn by shrinking, that being the strong one doesn't mean bleeding in silence, that you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. The group was quiet for a beat. Then Elise said, "I'd tell mine the same." We toasted with cheap wine in mismatched glasses, a sisterhood forged not in shared blood, but in chosen presence. And that was the lesson, wasn't it? That family isn't a birthright, it's a practice. It's the people who listen without fixing, who love without keeping score, who show up not because they have to, but because they want to. I used to think cutting off my father and sister was the end of something. Now I know it was the beginning of truth, of healing, of wholeness, not because I found better people, but because I finally became one for myself. The healing journey wasn't linear. It was a winding road of breakthroughs and setbacks, hope and doubt, light and shadow. But every step I took was a choice, a refusal to be defined by the past. One afternoon, while wandering through a small park near my apartment, I spotted a little girl chasing butterflies. She wore a bright yellow dress and laughed like she had no care in the world. She stopped suddenly, turned and called out, "Mommy!" For a moment, our eyes met. I smiled softly, shook my head and whispered, "I'm not." She giggled and ran back to her mother, leaving me with a strange warmth I hadn't expected. That day, I realized something important. I was no longer the shadow or the invisible one. I was my own light. And that was enough. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter. Not because I owed anyone anything, but because I wanted to give back, to be part of a community where strength was seen and silence was heard. Each woman had a story, some similar to mine, others wildly different, but they all shared one thing: resilience. One evening, after a group session, a woman named Maria stayed behind. She told me about her own journey, how she left an emotionally abusive relationship and rebuilt her life piece by piece. We talked for hours, sharing fears, hopes, and the little victories that don't always make headlines. Her courage inspired me, reminding me that healing is a shared path, not a solitary battle. I also reconnected with my therapist regularly, diving deeper into the layers of my past. Together, we unravelled the myths I'd been told about love and worth. We replaced them with truths rooted in self-compassion and authenticity. I learnt to celebrate my boundaries as acts of self-love, not selfishness. To honour my needs without guilt. To accept that sometimes saying no is the bravest thing you can do. My relationship with Vanessa and Dad remained distant but peaceful. I didn't seek reconciliation or validation. I had found something more important: peace within myself. And that peace was reflected in small moments: making coffee on a Sunday morning, listening to my favourite playlist without distraction, feeling the sun on my face during a quiet walk. I realized healing isn't about forgetting the past or erasing pain. It's about choosing to carry it differently, lighter, with grace, and with the courage to keep moving forward. One day, I hope to share my story with others, to be the voice for those who feel unseen, unheard, and unworthy. Because I know now, you don't have to bleed to be loved. You are already enough. And the day you stop begging is the day you finally begin to heal.